There is a huge mental health pandemic coming our way. We need to have everyone involved. It's about inclusion, and we can and have to do that through art and design. In order to do so, we just have to bring a bunch of people together who usually wouldn't meet in the room. Well, hello, this is the Climate-KIC experience with UNF Triple C. We were just brave enough to do exactly that. So we are now going to talk especially focused on cities, regions, where, you know, on those borders climate change doesn't stop, but collaboration is sometimes a little bit difficult. And we are bringing in the bridge of culture, creative industries through art. How can we bring cities and regions together all around the globe? So, no pressure to the panel, because we have work to do. This is about the fact that we are sitting here together, but this is also about we have to be fast and find a way how we can work together quickly, and that is your KPI for the next hour. So you're prepared. I will just let the round introduce yourself quickly, because then we can just jump right in, because also the reason, ladies and gentlemen, those wonderful people sitting here, that they also have the homework that they have to continue afterwards. So let's just jump into the game, and we will start with the minority. Hi, Jefferson. Please, do introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Jefferson Gomes. I'm director for innovation technology in Brazil. I'm speaking in behalf of SENAI, the National Confederation of Industry. We represent the Brazilian industry nationwide.
Sheela. Go a bit closer.
So, my name is Sheela Patel. I live in Mumbai in India, and I am part of a global social movement of people who live informally called Slum Dwellers International. And I happen to be invited to be a member of the new Bauhaus movement, which is why I'm here today. It's an attempt to create a policy framework for Europe and hopefully for the rest of us on the issues of how the built environment addresses challenges of local and regional culture and traditions.
Well, we're going just to your colleague, the other architect, Ebtissam.
Hello, everyone. I'm truly honored to be among this wonderful panel, and I'm Ebtissam Farid. I'm the head of School of Design and Media and co-founder of Encode Studio. Encode Studio is an architectural studio specialized in architecture, interior architecture, and product design. We've been trying to, challenge the Egyptian market and how they actually produce the ideas and not even the product. It's about how they actually approach the concept by using the computer as an abstract machine. We've been trying to introduce different processes or new technologies, like, for example, artificial intelligence, machine learning, computational design, CAD/CAM, and so on, in order to actually challenge the critical design agenda where they just produce designs or just imitate designs. So we wanted to move from imitation to innovation, and this is where we're actually challenging the Egyptian market. And thank you.
Hi everybody, my name is Alison Gilliland. I am a local politician in Dublin, the capital of Ireland. It's also its former mayor. I would describe myself as an amateur architect. I designed the extension on my parents' house when I was 12, and I've just finished renovating my own house. I love design, I love beauty, and I'm really privileged to be on this panel.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Kirsten Dunlop. I'm the CEO of an organization called EIT Climate-KIC, which works in 39 countries across the world from a kind of European origins and is working on climate innovation development with a particular focus on systemic change. So designing climate solutions for adaptation and for mitigation, and partnering with cities and with regions and with countries to achieve whole place transformation, whole community, whole industry transformation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Sheela, I wanted to start with you because, like, especially you are on the high-level advisory board for the European Bauhaus. So when you, like, that means like you have to bring like everyone together through aesthetic sustainability and inclusion. So like, how was it so far for you? And like, what else do you need? Keeping in mind you have a lot of really interesting resources around you, so you might be able to call them out.
I think that the most important thing is the place you stay, the place you live, and the place you work belongs to you. And today, the way in which the world has been designed, the attributions that you seek to put into it, which represent your cultures, your tradition, your placemaking, is taken away from you. It is being professionalized. It is being extrapolated on what is good globally. And so an important part is to say, how do you give back that cultural space back to communities, especially those whose cultures and traditions have been subdued in this process. So how do you make that into a transformative process, keeping in mind that it has to come along with the challenge of addressing climate-linked issues of building materials, designs, and the changing nature of how the world is going to be now, the stresses it's going to bring. And so what do people need to know? What do those who create policies need to understand and acknowledge? And for somebody like me who comes from the global south, as Europeans, you have no idea how much you project what you think is good on everybody else. So how do you make that conversation equal? How do you make the negotiation equal? And how do you produce resources that will make that change a reality? Because there's a lot of talk, even in COP here, about what everybody needs to do. But there isn't enough money that goes behind what happens. So how do you put all this together in an equitable way? I think for me, that's the central part of this process, because we all live in the built environment today, whether you live in urban, rural, north or south.
Do you have an answer to the how, from your perspective?
I'm a grassroots activist, so my roots are in the communities. So both in the communities in the north and the south, my focus is to create awareness and challenges to top-down institutional arrangements, to listen, to negotiate, and to act, and to finance. And so just a few days ago, we launched a campaign called Roof Over Our Heads, which is basically to help very poor households locked in informality in the global south to learn new ways to make their homes resilient in a situation where nobody supports them. But we have a sister campaign that we hope to do in the global north, which is all the people who live in public housing, whose homes need to be retrofitted to be energy efficient for improved habitat. So there's a campaign called Retrofitting for Resilience, which we hope to do in the global north, saying that even though we live in the south, we care about vulnerable communities in the north as well. So we hope to engage Europe in that as well.
I think your message is heard loud and clear, and we will start training this now. So I'm especially looking to Alison. But before we're going to Alison, I wanted to fulfill my challenge to Jefferson, because SENAI we're talking about technology, industry, research. Where is the creativity, the inclusion, the aesthetics in there? Especially when you hear stories like from Sheela. Where can you come in?
Yeah, good question. The creativity is for sure is inside the diversity. Brazil is a continental land, and we have 27 states. In each state we have around 15 to 20 different industrial sectors. If you have to consider that in Brazil we have 6 biomas and also a very large coast, ocean coast. So then if you see something like that, we can imagine that the people are very different, and then the network you have to do, considering all industries we have there for different kinds of mindsets. If you don't consider the idea of collaboration, you are not so good. That's why you have in each state federations of industries, and nationwide speaking, we have a confederation. But inside the confederation, we have SENAI. It's a national service for training people. Every year, we have around 1.5 million enrollments. Since the beginning of SENAI, we formed around 8 million people. So, if you have such kind of training systems, we have to put inside the creativity system since the beginning, because they are very young, and you have also PhD programs inside the system. 10 years ago, we went to Fraunhofer in Germany, and then they asked them, hey, let's help us to build a kind of technological innovative atmosphere. And then we create 26 institutes more regarded to how can we bring results from biomas, from renewable energy, from circular economy inside our country. So then creating such kind of network, nowadays we are more focused, 10 years after, we are more focused on, for example, mission-oriented programs. I don't know how far you know of mission-oriented programs. This is a kind of constellation between state, public sector, and private sector. Then we elect anchor companies, and the anchor companies, they come and they give challenges to us.
So you're going to challenge and include culture and creative industries in Brazil. Is that a promise?
That include, yes, sure. That include.
We have this on recording, by the way.
Yeah,
right?
please record this. And that includes also when we have such kind of mission-oriented programs. For sure, we are very deep in process in terms of technologies, but you have to understand the externalities in terms of what kind of infrastructure we need when we talk about green hydrogen. But in South Brazil, but even so in North Brazil, in the middle of Amazonas, it's totally different near Argentina. But if you have such kind of infrastructure, what kind of people we have to train? And what kind of new business we have to build? And if you have such kind of atmosphere, we have to put in the same melting pot legislations and regulations. So
Fantastic.
That is the question.
Luckily, we have Alison here, where we can talk about legislation, but also like for a city like Dublin, like how does that resonate with you? And then I'm looking already to Ebtissam as the architect, the change maker in the middle. If like, you know, Alison or Jefferson would come to you, what would you actually say? Of course, teamed up with Sheela. But Alison, how does that resonate for you in Ireland and in Dublin?
Yeah, I suppose at local level, in cities and regions, there's spaces for cultural creation, there's spaces for cultural enjoyment, for innovation, for co-creating local governments with their citizens, with businesses, with academia. And for me, I suppose, combining both culture, technology, innovation and Bauhaus, I see them as a vehicle almost for communicating and messaging climate change, for exploring climate change and climate action. And then when we get into the new Bauhaus, which I think is amazing, it really helps citizens experience a climate actioned living, realizing what it feels like to be living in a sustainable space or a sustainable city. And if you put all of that together, I think that will lead to what we ultimately want, which is a collective changing of social norms. to be pro-sustainability. And maybe to elaborate on that a little bit more, communicating through the creative arts and all the disciplines, whether that be architecture or technology, I think can really facilitate individual citizens and communities to connect. As a woman, I am more attracted to go into a conversation about the climate impact on gender and women. People with disabilities will try and find those spaces that speak to them about their needs and their sustainable lifestyle. People who are more vulnerable. So I think creativity, culture, innovation really supports people to make sense. And those who may be a little more resistant, if you go into a community and you co-create with them, it allows you to dialogue with people who are resistant, for them to understand and be more aware of what you're trying to do, and collectively you can all go together. What I love about Bauhaus is that practicality and efficiency and effectiveness does not come at the cost of beauty. Form and function does not have to clash. And I think that it just goes beyond the visual, the aesthetic that we see in a building. It actually has a massive impact in the entire value chain within that building, the putting together of the design, the selection of materials, the energy system that you choose, the heating, the cooling. And we've some really great examples in Dublin. We've an ESB building that is incorporated into a very old street of what we would call Georgian architecture. So it's red brick, it's very high. People don't like to see that aesthetic interrupted. But what the architects did, they used the visual of the old. And again, we're going back to our built heritage, and we want to preserve that, but yet we want it to be sustainable. And they looked at a whole life cycle approach to that, both from the materials that were used, the design that was used, but also the socio-technical interaction, the interaction of the people who are going to work there with the building, both inside and outside. So I think the new Bauhaus, as the soul of the European Green Deal, gives us an opportunity to experience that shift and bring people along with us. And when you see it, and it's beautiful, but it's also sustainable, I think it calms the soul, and it makes people, I can see you all smiling at the thing. It makes us happy, and I think it makes us just want to do more of that.
Thank you so much, Ebtissam. So especially you with the biggest smile, also you as the architect on the ground with your own studio. What are your action points? If you could do what you would like to do.
Well, to be honest, okay, can you hear me? Yeah, just to be honest, I'll just go back a bit. As I've mentioned before, I have two hats. Okay, so the first hat is being an academic, and the other one is being a practitioner. And this is where actually I started to be a practitioner, because when you teach, you feel that you're teaching something, and you don't actually can prove it. And if you want to inspire young ones, and you want them to believe in sustainability and green initiatives and all of these initiatives that we're actually speaking about, we need to start with the education. And this is where I actually want to address architecture education. It's actually extremely vital to start not just architecture education even from, from schools. Okay, so I've read some notes so we need to have proper induction for creative industry initiatives could be initiated underneath the schools and high schools and universities, which is extremely important, where you actually link research, technologies, disciplines, whether architecture, interior, fashion, whatever industry related to creative industry, in addition to application, and where these students start to believing in whatever you are actually telling them. So linking education with the industry is extremely important, extremely important. I also believe that sustainable practices and applications should be, a standard component in the design education in general. It needs to be introduced when you actually check the curriculums. It's always like a garnish. It's always like you do whatever you want and then you just put like a cherry on top. We have to make it sustainable. So let's put more plants. Let's put more photovoltaics on top of the buildings. And so it doesn't get into the core. It doesn't get engaging whatever we do actually in the processes. Get us real problems like Sheela was mentioning. Just get us real problems to start working on it. Something that they would feel that they're part of solving a problem, a true one, in order to make it felt, make it just reaches the heart, and not just being beautiful paper and beautiful drawings where all the architects can actually do, whether manual or digital or whatever. It's about the true essence of what we are doing as a message of the profession. I also believe that one of the struggles for the creative industries in general is actually that they're too far away from business. Too far away. They're somewhere else. They have no clue about the business and how things are happening. They're just enjoying the process of design and just doing materials and so on. So they need to get to ground, and they need to have this dialogue and conversation and understand how business actually works. I was just like enjoying the previous discussion about the fashion and how they were always introducing the word business, business, business all the time. So this creative industry needs to wake up, start getting to ground, start having these important dialogues with other partners, and they're not just giving us beautiful outputs and that's it. So, yeah.
I think thank you for that summary, also action point, because I just saw everyone taking notes. Well done. I think it's because we can, in a collaboration, we can learn from each other. We just heard that on the other panel. It's like everybody has resources. If we bring them together, we can be faster together. One of those things is like we in Climate-KIC, we have a methodology called sense making. I'm building the bridge to Kirsten here now. Because like in the methodology of sense making is like we are listening to a lot of different voices from different areas, and then we have to bring them together. And I think especially that topic is like how, with the end game of like saving Mother Earth, is like that we have to bring business as well as aesthetics together. How can we do that? How can we make sense of that?
Well, I'd very much like to pick up on what Alison was saying and all of us on, first of all, just perhaps to give a little bit of context, for anyone who doesn't know what the new European Bauhaus is, it is an initiative launched in the European Union to capture a thread from the past and turn it into a framing for the future that unites in our sustainability efforts three critical threads: beauty and aesthetics, affordability and accessibility, and sustainability with a principle of regeneration. And one of the critical elements here is that we turn the built environment, which, as you rightly say, Sheela, is not just cities, but every aspect of the human built environment, into a life partner for restoring and regenerating our planet, which opens up a beautiful, huge space of design challenge. How would we reframe our thinking about what we make for ourselves to be in, and what the design principles are for what we make to be in? And I think that's very much this question of how do we think about systems change leading to paradigm change? And I think your framing, Alison, is fantastic. This notion, I was taking notes, that we experience climate action living. And the word experience is incredibly important, that we really use the way in which we tap into the creative part of our brains, and we tap in somatically to our souls, to our guts, to our body embodiment in every sense of what it means to live well, so as to create a collective change in social norms. And so for me, as an organization, for example, working on hundreds of cities, helping hundreds of cities decarbonize, that is an incredibly abstract, technocratic construct for many. It's not a place and not a framing that allows you to meet communities street by street or neighborhoods on the ground or connect with, in Europe, 98% of industry is SME and really small and medium enterprise, and really have a discussion about how do we make a change that is felt. But if you can begin to make this about images and possibilities, so if we bring in creative industries to help to create acts of imagination that depict for us and represent in streets and neighborhoods, what does living differently, living sustainably really look like? How do we change our notion of identity around it? For me, one of the most critical threads or opportunities in this challenge and this opportunity of bringing creative industries, culture and arts into the core of decarbonizing whole cities is that we address directly the identity of cities and the identity of us as residents in places and spaces that make meaning. Who am I when I live in Dublin, when I live in Amsterdam or Madrid? What does it mean to live sustainably as a community? How can we represent that to ourselves visually, experientially, before we rationalize it? So it's an emotional experience and an emotional evocation. And I think that helps us much faster than anything rational change our habits and practices. And this is the opportunity, Lisa, as you mentioned, for catalyzing change, to really harness our capacity to imagine an alternative way of living rather than to continue to tell ourselves, these are the things I have to stop, this is the stuff that I have to let go of, I'm going to be living in a world with no meat, I don't get to have more than 2 pieces of clothing a year, I can't get in a car, and people just feel more and more and more constrained. Well, I feel guilty, I feel afraid, I don't feel like this is exciting, and I don't know really how to engage with this. We need to flip it on. How is it accessible? How is it beautiful? How is it affordable? How is it a space of genuine co-design and co-creation, as you were saying, Sheela, that you are really working on what are the principles of living that we, in this community, in this place, care for, that we commit for, that we build for. I think that is the extraordinary opportunity we have. It's long overdue, it's desperately needed, and I was thinking before listening to the panel with Ninjas in Pajamas, we need the whole gaming industry to start creating virtual environments in which people see sustainable living. They engage with it, they play with it, they remake it, they model it. We don't need it to look like our current built environment. And we need the opportunity for wood in construction or nature-based materials to help people learn how do we reverse the Anthropocene by creating these partnerships where our buildings are absorbing carbon and emitting chemicals, literally oxytocin effects on the way in which we are. And then we can collaborate more effectively together. This is the point of biophilic environments. So I think it's a fantastic opportunity.
And also, we can't miss, it's our duty not to miss the opportunity. We have to point to that and open and enable. So, Sheela, especially for you, you're sitting on an advisory board of a new European Bauhaus, and we just had a discussion before, it's we have to be far more inclusive, not only only Europe and then all of the sides up and down, left and right. So I'm really intrigued, because we wanted to talk about what would be an international version, a global version of the new Bauhaus look like.
You know, when I was invited to be on this group, I said, what's it got to do with me? I work with slum dwellers in the global south. But I have met an amazing group of people who are very different from each other. We said, what are we going to talk to each other? And we are an amazing representation of people who aspire to make change happen. And I think that I was sitting in the fashion industry discussion. What I wear today has an impact on the world. And it's got nothing to do just with gaming, it's got nothing to do just with who wears what in Europe, but it has to do with everything, everywhere, all the time. And I think how we create the language to do that is also happening at a time when everybody is examining the impact of 200 to 500 years of colonization that is impacting the way we think, what we think is good. I remember going to Frankfurt for a meeting, and some an architect telling me, you know, German architects love to build very tall buildings because in Frankfurt we can't make them like that. And I said, oh, that's why you're messing with my city. You're building these tall buildings that we can't even look at. But I think it's important for the way in which we talk about globalization to encompass lives of everybody. Because you can't think of a new world in which you're only looking at yourself and your own habits and your own choices. You have to look at the impact of that on everything else. So I represent the other end of the spectrum from what many of you here do, which is the 1 billion people whose homes are not fit for purpose in the next 5 years, where too much wind, too much rain, too much sun, too much extreme climate is destroying that very vulnerable survival-linked construction that is self-designed, self-constructed and self-financed. Because we are outside every city in the global south's frame of reference. We are illegal, we are invisible, and we are marginalized. And for me, it's a representational challenge for everybody, including the new Bauhaus, to say, what are you going to do with them? Not for them, with them. And I think that's the way we have to work together. And I can tell you that communities, Teresa, put your hand up. She's a resident of an informal settlement in Manila that faces challenges every year of flooding and of mudslides and everything. And her network in Philippines is our teacher on how to deal with calamities. And we want to make that a respectable, legitimate and acknowledged thing, that people who are architects, designers and engineers sit side by side and work out solutions that are culturally adequate. So big challenge, but
I think it's like, that's like the position and the respect towards the job of a designer. 85% of the sustainable footprint of every product is decided in its design phase. We are sitting in a room where like technology and engineering are like the ones who make decisions, and then designers have to make it pretty and like, by the way, also sustainable. I think it's like there's something to be said, and we heard it before, there's a huge business opportunity also, that when we re-educate and re-skills the designers in green skills, in civil engineering, in digitalization, and a little bit of policy and governance, to make the designer as the highest priest of sustainability, that of course working together with business, with engineering, but everything has to start for the concern of sustainability, not vice versa. And in order to do this, we are starting with the designers. We call them agents of change, because the advantage with art and designs is they're everywhere. They've been invisible for a very long time, but I think especially during the COVID crisis, we've lost the oil in the mechanics, in the system. So it was always invisible, but like now we have to give it power again. And yes, there's a beginning on European level, is that like formally it, for the first time, imagine that, like look at the eyes of architects and fashion designers, cultural heritage, craftspeople, like we've been doing this for generations, and for the first time you see us, like yeah, we have a little bit of a right to be angry, but like let's use that energy to say like, okay, this is now the time, it's a new rise of the creative class. And now it's about building bridges. Yes, Jefferson, I'm looking at you again. From the industry side, is because you've been in a room with business, industry, technology, research. If we are now challenging you specifically to like how to bring the designer in as an equal.
That's a very important question. I'm an engineer, I'm so sorry, I'm not an architect. No, numbers.
That's okay.
I need numbers. I just can work with numbers. So then the main point is I'm not afraid about the future. Actually, I have a job to be done. Yeah. That is my job. And in that case, when I see the 17 sustainable objectives we have to accomplish. So if you do something like that in 7 years, we're going to become better people. Eh? We can understand something like that. Sure. But I'm an engineer. Then that means for me, if you put all people, worldwide speaking, in good conditions, we are going to need more 50% of energy, 40% more foods, 40% more water. So that is the point for me. And all industrial goods we have here are based on 3 materials: polymers, glasses, and metals. For producing polymers, I need more 300 Celsius degree. For producing glasses, more than 1,500 degrees, Celsius degrees. And metals, more than 1,000. So that means a huge amount of energy, huge amount of water. Just in Brazil, the percentage of the Brazilian industry in GDP is just 10%. We use around 40% of all Brazilian energy and 27% of water. Not the population, the industry. So if you consider a better future for us, you have to change the way we produce materials. So I like so much Bauhaus because the Bauhaus methodology is the principle of design thinking. Yeah? So then we have to listen people. But we have to listen people, they have deep knowledge, they have also associative knowledge. Then you can combine both people. What we are trying to do in terms of industry, sure, you have to communicate better, because if you can add value, applying new kinds of products, not wasting our biodiversity, we can maybe do something in terms of biochemicals, or in terms of new kinds of foods. We are using bananas trees and also pinus trees for producing textiles. New kind of textiles, new kind of foods also. So, but if you can do it something like that, we have to communicate, but you have to audit all projects. We have to understand the whole knowledge process, not only a part of the process, because you always speak so separated. We have also to follow or to tracking the money, all money invested for everything. If I have public money for training people, for research projects, you have to follow the money. And also, in add to this, we have to localize the ideas, not globalize. We have to use global perspectives, but applying in local perspectives. So that is what you are trying. And let me say some last word. We have used this in Brazil. We have used this. I don't know if you know this kind of book. Was designed by EIT.
Climate-KIC, yeah.
And it's a very interesting visual toolbox for every type of companies. Then we are trying to implement in small and medium-sized industries in Brazil. So that is one part.
I would just thanks for that. Also, I hear commitments over commitments over commitments for you working with the design and the Bauhaus industry. So, but since you mentioned the toolbox, maybe Kirsten, you want to expand a little bit on that, especially because we're talking about systemic change here, and we need tools. And of course, an artist has tools as well as an engineer has tools. But together we have a toolbox.
Yeah, thank you. And the toolbox comes from the work that we are doing, and actually doing in all sorts of contexts in Europe, but also globally. We use a language of deep demonstration because we're trying to create this notion that as humans, we have taught ourselves, and this is also one of our long-standing self-trained things, to believe what we see. And so our struggle, we observe that one of the struggles is we are almost all of us waiting to see the fully regenerative slum, a sustainable city, places, and let's hope that these are actually places for living, that we stop categorizing into the words we're using. And so that requires us to mobilize our efforts to actually achieve that. And one of the things we've learned is that the flaw in the innovation system is that it is completely designed for and trained for individualistic behavior. It is looking for individual solutions that tend to be funded in sectors, by sectors, or within individual city budget lines that are in water or in transport or in building. And that does not enable us to design for the interconnections and the interfaces and to join the dots and connect. And yet we live in coordinated, dot-joined environments. So we need to adapt our innovation design to enable us to actually innovate the whole living system of the physical city and the informal city of habits, practices, choices, mindsets, self-created environments. That is a toolbox that in fact consists of creating, for example, an agreement around intention that is strong enough to hold through multiple political cycles. It's about creating awareness and understanding, as you are rightly saying, Jefferson, of the system itself. What are its assets, its resources, its relationships with legislation, with communities. It's about creating a portfolio environment so that you can help people activate hundreds of interventions simultaneously and connect them, and then through sense-making have conversations about what we learn from the experience of innovation and connect those conversations and that interpretation and understanding to decision-making and capital. And that kind of, this toolbox essentially enables you to do that kind of work. And I think what we learn, though, is it is all good, but it needs to have emotions. It needs to have listening. It needs to have a kind of a sense of connection to self. And this element has so far been still underestimated and under-allowed for. And I was thinking, you know, if the ultimate challenge to designers is to get from systems change to paradigm change, then the big change we need is to create environments and build for or design for in business and in cities and in every form of habitation an embodied understanding, and I mean embodied, of the relationship between each other, between ourselves and the environment, that real sense of building for relationship. We have built for boxes and categories and structures. Now we have to retrain ourselves to really think in relationship. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So we're coming a little bit to the close, and I want to give us space for like a couple of questions. Yes, you can ask questions. Ebtissam, what are you going to tell your students when you're in class next time after this panel?
Well, I believe I would speak more about the transdisciplinary between us and how these creative industry, we need to think of finding eco solutions where they solve actually sustainable development problems that we're actually having them and not just paper stuff. And the most challenging thing is to have it inclusively. And this is where the level of having everyone included and not just like doing it on a certain level where you design for people you don't actually feel or know or as I told you, for me it's all about believing, and this is where the responsibility of a teacher comes and how you actually transmits this responsibility towards the young generation who are actually going to lead the future and not us, I guess. Yeah. So yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you so much for giving, conveying the message that something is happening, and then bring your students back in next time. Alison, your inspiration, also keeping in mind that Dublin is one of our net zero cities.
Yeah.
So how can we infuse creativity and the agents of change, as the designers called now, to speed up and help you, especially to fulfill the climate contracts everybody signed?
Absolutely. I was very much struck by Kirsten's comment there about being in boxes. And we very much work that way at local level. And a lot of it is to do with our budgets, because we get a budget for this and we get a budget for that. We recently pedestrianised one of the main routes across the city. And it was done brilliantly by our transport section, but there was no one to follow up on that placemaking, on that enhancement, that sense that this is a pedestrianised zone rather than a piece of tarmac where cars no longer live. So I think we have a little bit of work to do on that flexibility and working across it. We do have one section in Dublin City Council called Smart Dublin, and it's sort of, we call it like a semi-state. It sort of works under the radar, but it is brilliant at co-creation. We have certain challenges no more than every other city and regions. So what Smart Dublin does is talk to the market, talk to the creatives, talk to the tech sector, and ask them to work with us to create solutions to our challenges. And then what we do, we bring our citizens in to work with us as well, to pilot it, to test it, and that lived experience. So we can capture the lived experience, and then we can tweak it, we can change it, we can be flexible and adapt it until we get it right for that context. But it's not so rigid that it will only work in that context. It can adapt to others. And then we also have an academic strand that is recording and monitoring, so that we can pass it on to others who want to learn from it. So I think if we take a more flexible, adaptable approach, where sustainability is your lens, it's your underpinning principle. We've just done that with our development plan for next 6 years. It was really difficult because people were saying, actually, one of the questions was like, what has sustainability got to do with culture? And we're going, well, just think about it. It's there. They are the creatives that will create it. Can I just talk about business? Because I do think the people that get sustainability can absolutely see where the business opportunities are. And they're the people that in 10 years' time will be left standing and will be controlling. And particularly now, where we actually have to pivot the neoliberal economic model. It's going to fall. They're holding on really, really dearly to it. But people on the ground who get it will. And I'm reminded of, I think it's Elkington's, an academic in the 80s, talked about the Triple P. People, planet, and profit. On an equal. Business can make profit, but they can also make and contribute to a sustainable planet and people who love and work and recreate and enjoy that planet and are well and healthy in it.
Thank you so much. Well, we have work to do, and we have it on recording now for the commitments. So to everyone, thank you so much for joining us. The applause is yours. We do have time for questions. If we have any questions, anybody wants to join the commitment? Yeah.
I don't have a question, but I want to make one really important connection between what we've been discussing and where we are. We are in the UNF Triple C Pavilion for Global Innovation, which is a space, and I declare an interest in the sense that we are one of the organizations that's been part of helping to build that. And it's only just launched, it has a long way to go. But I particularly wanted to pick up on what you were saying, Sheela, because the point of creating this space in the UN process, and I know many of us are discussing our concern about what is happening around us. A lot of broadcasting, almost no listening, and kind of a lot of replication and duplication of effort, and almost no really deep kind of, oh, you're doing something similar, let us forge, merge, combine. And I'm worried. I know we are all worried. One of the points of this here is to try to expand the space for innovation to be much more encompassing. And one of those big design principle challenges or design mindset shifts is we have got innovation pitched on a neoliberal model that says you innovate for the elite and it'll drop down to the lowest level. We have to invert that. We have got to start innovating right on the ground where crisis is and where transformation is happening and needed. And then we learn, ground up, how to live differently. And my one plea is that this space is a space where we train ourselves to invert our entire model of how we've learned to understand the world. Trees are watered from the roots.
Thank you very much. Again, the applause is yours. Also, hello to the internet. Thank you for joining us as well. Well, stay tuned. We are going more deeper into creative and design industries, and we are now going to talk about digital arts and sustainable web and the bridge in between is sustainability. Thank you so much. See you next time. So I now can hand over to the one and only Moderator, my partner in crime in moderating this